Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about the topic of zombies. Just kind of like overall the question of like, what is your favorite type of zombie? You know, and it's like, it's kind of a weird question when you actually think about it, but when you break it down, there are quite a few different types of zombies. There's fast zombies, there's slow zombies, there's science fictional zombies, there's supernatural zombies, well, more fantasy zombies, whatever the case may be. I mean, because for one, like everyone has their own like likes and dislikes when it comes to zombies. What I mean is like some people, obviously, like people don't like zombies that are fast. Like you have stuff like I guess 28 weeks later or 28 days / 28 weeks later, which even that's kind of a question in itself, like what is a zombie in those cases? Because it's like, do they count as zombies even though it's kind of a rage virus? That's a question. I mean, I've never heard a lot of people bring up. The only person I've ever really heard bring it up is Bernie from Rooster Teeth. Like he's brought it up on the podcast a couple times, but it's like, it does kind of make you wonder, like, is that kind of counted as zombieism? Because zombieism in some cases is considered like a virus or whatever anyway. So I mean, typically that's how it works in a more like science fictional realm. Like they never dive into it, but I'm sure that's how zombieism works in like The Walking Dead, because it is like a virus that is, I mean, if everyone's already contracted it, I mean, obviously spoiler alert for like what, season 3, but the moment you die you become a zombie. So it's like whether you get bit or not, the moment you die you become a zombie anyway, because the whole virus is already in your system nevertheless. And then there's the whole like Last of Us, for example. They have like different levels of zombies. There's like runners, isn't that what they're called? The ones that are more human-like, who are just kind of who are infected. And then you have like bloaters and clickers, depending on what level of infection, like how long you've been infected. And even that's just kind of like, does that really count as zombieism, because it's a fungus infection kind of controlling you? So different layer of zombieism all in itself. But then, like I said, those kind of, some of those can count as like fast zombies, especially the runners. But then like other people like, no, like a zombie is someone that has their flesh is peeling off, they're slow, they crave brains. That's always been the key components when it comes to zombies, at least media wise. That's always been a thing, which is so interesting to me, because that has not been a staple for zombies in a long time. Like zombies eat brains. That hasn't been a thing for a very long time, because like it's mostly been like, oh, zombies track you down and they rip you apart and they eat every bit of you. They eat human flesh. Maybe that was always a thing, but I've always associated zombies with brains. And it's something, I think it was not until iZombie came back that I was like, right, that just up and disappeared, because lately zombies just eat you and tear you apart and eat your flesh. That's kind of always been their thing lately. But it's like, that's always been a staple for zombies. I'm actually kind of curious to find out like where that whole situation came from. I'll probably make like a separate video about that. I had to look into that, because I am curious about like where that came from and why people steered away from it. I guess because it just, I guess them trying to tear out all your flesh is a lot more menacing than just them coming after your brains or something like that. Maybe in some cases people feel like that's antiquated, like brains. I mean, once again, that's what makes iZombie very special, because they kind of brought that back when it comes to zombieism. That's the thing about when it comes to zombies. The question is like, what kind of zombie, like if you were a zombie or whatever in this particular case, what would you like? I'm sure like for the horror effect and everything, you're like, oh, I totally want to be like, you know, maybe like a Romero zombie, or maybe a Walking Dead, you know, Walker zombie. Like that question's there. I mean, because it's like, if you take something like iZombie, which has its own like science fictional approach to zombies, which I am curious how like I'm not that familiar with the comic book. I knew that the comic book's more supernatural, but I don't know how zombieism works in that regard. But obviously it's a whole like putting so and so together. Like obviously I don't want to spoil the show for you, but it's like you basically put this and this together and that basically created zombie. There's literally a formula for zombieism in iZombie. But nevertheless, like when you become a zombie in iZombie, you don't just immediately like, oh, like lose all your humanity. You actually maintain some of yours. Obviously, like there's a whole like zombie mode where like if you don't eat or you get super pissed or whatever, your adrenaline kind of kicks in and you like lose all control and you're ready to rip and eat anybody apart, you know? So there's that aspect, but more often than not, you maintain your humanity. Obviously you lose the taste for food and stuff like that. All you kind of crave is brains and stuff, but still. And they're pretty much stay purely intact. I mean, obviously their skin gets pale and their hair turns white, which obviously there's a remedy for that, because it's like, oh yeah, you just have to like dye your hair and tan. It's a compensation for it, like, you know, hiding the fact that you're a zombie. Like I said, once again, like iZombie's kind of in its own thing of like its own like twist on zombieism, and I think that's what works well for that show, that it kind of does its own thing with zombieism, which it isn't the first one to kind of do that, because there's a movie that's Warm Bodies that kind of has a similar vibe when it comes to its zombies as well, except like like in that world there's like, I forgot what they were called, but there's like the more decayed zombies, there's the other zombies who still look very human-like, but they don't keep their humanity when they became zombies. They only get humanity back when they've eaten people's brains. Essentially, that's what kind of gets their heart pumping again. If you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend you check it out. Especially if you do like iZombie, I think Warm Bodies would be kind of along the same lines, because iZombie kind of tackles that whole aspect too of like, if you go long enough without brains, you do kind of like start decaying, and you do just kind of turn into your more traditional zombie, like after a long enough period of time without brains, you know. So you kind of just, your humanity fades away, and once that happens, there is no coming back. All those I've been talking about so far have been the science fictional side of things. There's also the more supernatural, like I said, fantasy side of things. Like you take Corey Wise Zombie, Deska, or Is This a Zombie, where the main protagonist, Ayumu, is a zombie, but he doesn't fall under the same like guidelines as a zombie. He doesn't eat human flesh, he doesn't eat brains, he doesn't tear people apart. He's pretty much kind of like iZombie. He's pretty normal, except like there's no changes at all, except for the fact is he can't go out in the sun. I don't actually know if it lasts long enough. Will it eventually kill him, or will he just dry up and just be useless or something? I don't know about that. And also, as a zombie, it seems like he also has the ability to kind of basically absorb magic. It plays a part in the story, which I don't know if that's just Ayumu or is that just zombies in general. I can't, it's been a while since I watched the anime. I've never read any of the mangas or read the original light novels based on, so I'm not even 100% sure like because it doesn't seem like the anime really covers everything that comes with zombieism in that. And to me, it will always be a cool aspect about him being a zombie is the fact is that he can, because he's a zombie, like he can take a lot more damage, so he has this ability where he can basically push his body to higher percentages. Where a normal human body can go to 100%, he can fully charge his punches to be like, oh, this is like my punch at 300%, and it will break his arm, but because he's a zombie, it will automatically regenerate. So there is another series that I am slightly familiar with called Zombie Loan, and I say slightly, I mean very minuscule amount of like awareness, but like it has a more fantasy element of like how zombieism works too. It kind of borderlines the same thing as like Is This a Zombie, but it has its own set of rules. Like I barely remember because I've read a very small amount of the manga years ago, so that's something I would have to kind of do more research on. So, but I do know that it has a more magical side when it comes to its zombieism as well. So I mean, that's also another thing too, like zombieism kind of works, like even how you get turned into a zombie is very different. Now you take something like I brought up Walking Dead, how like the whole like zombieism works in that, like it being a virus that's already in you, like you just have to die. Like you could be bitten by a zombie, that's just because it'll give you a fever and it'll eventually kill you and then you'll turn into a zombie. But you take something like iZombie and more traditional zombie stuff, it's like you get bitten by a zombie. I feel like now it's become scratch, but before it was always bite. I guess it's almost like the whole vampirism thing, but now they've kind of changed it up. Even vampires don't work the same way. I mean, that's kind of a whole thing in itself. Like they work very differently, depending on the media and everything. But this isn't about vampires. This is about zombies. Whereas like sometimes it was always like, oh, zombies. I guess because their main thing would always be they bite you, and that's how it's passed on to you, the whole virus aspect. But in iZombie, it's like it's not even a bite. I don't think there's ever been a bite. It's always been a scratch, which is interesting. I guess because it's like, because iZombie never tackles like them biting you. It's always a scratch. Even going back to the example of Is This a Zombie, like that's more of a magical thing. Like one of the main protagonists of the series, she is a necromancer. So for her, it's a spell that like adds into the whole magic aspect of like making someone a zombie. So even then, like they even have their own different approaches to zombieism. But like I said, like the whole like biting to become zombie, it's there, but you know, in different shades. My question to you is, as I've constantly asked throughout the video, what kind of zombie would you prefer to be? Like, you know, and to some people that might be an easy question. It might like, well, obviously I'm gonna be an iZombie zombie because I still get to be me. Yes, there's the whole aspect of eating brains, but there might be some people who are like, no, I don't want none of this modern zombie. I want me some traditional zombie, flesh falling off, just going very slow, coming after you. Like, I mean, it doesn't even just have to be like, oh, what kind of zombies you would want to be. Like, what kind of zombies do you prefer in general? Like, what kind of zombie material? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm curious. Like me, I don't know. Like to me, it's like they're interesting, but like to me, I will always pick like iZombie or like is this a zombie, just because they're so different from what a traditional zombie is, which is, like I said, that's something I have to research into more traditional zombies, the whole brain eating aspect, which iZombie brings back, but kind of does its own little fun little thing with it. I mean, even though it does this whole fun thing with it, it's still a scary thing when you actually break down and think about it. It's like, I mean, especially where the series is now, no spoilers obviously, but where things are heading in season 4 is just kind of I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, that was the whole purpose of this video. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good